and everybody who's coming into the country needs to get a test within 24 hours of getting on the plane to come here.
Well, what about people who don't take a plane and just these border crossers coming in huge numbers?
You know, that's a different issue. You don't have the capability, as you know, of somebody getting on a plane, getting checked, looking at a passport. We don't have that there.
Is there something to do to test these people somewhere else?
There is testing at the border under certain circumstances, as you know.
Yeah, but not by the federal government.
Mr. President, your reaction?
It is a disaster. We have millions of people flowing across, and we're not only talking about the China virus or COVID, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about many other diseases coming over the border that are far worse, coming over the border, and nobody is being tested. Nobody is being checked. Prisons of other countries are being dumped into our country. We're like a dumping ground. There's never been, we have the strongest border in the history of our country. The wall was largely built. It could have been finished in 3 weeks, and they decided not to finish the openings. It's just some openings. We did an incredible job, 500 miles of wall, and this is why that coupled with other things gave us the greatest numbers we've ever had, the most successful it's ever been. We take people in, but we take them in legally. Now, one other thing that's pouring in right now that nobody even mentioned are drugs. Drugs are coming in at a rate of 7 times greater than when I was doing it, and our numbers were going way down. We were having the lowest drug numbers, and if you look at the numbers of people that are coming in now, we're millions and millions of people every couple of months. We're looking at 12, 13, 14, maybe even 15 million people a year, and none of those people are tested.
So it seems to me that the Remain in Mexico program that was widely ridiculed by the current President of the United States, now according to the courts, have to be re-implemented and officially goes back into production. Remain in Mexico starts again. But your policy is back in, I think, starting today. What's your reaction to that?
Well, they should have never ended it. If Joe Biden would have come in and just gone to the beach, he would have been successful in many ways because all of this stuff, the border was the best it ever was and getting better. Drugs coming in was getting at a level that we've never seen before.
But is there a sense of gratification, Mr. President? Is there a sense of gratification for you personally that a policy that you ridiculed, the courts are making it put back in?
No, because I want to see good for the country, Brian. It's so important to me. I want to see good for the country. There's no gratification. What they're doing is destroying our country. Our country is being destroyed before your very eyes, and I've never seen anything like it. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, I got us there. We were down to 2,500 troops. The Taliban respected us. Abdul, I dealt with him a lot. He respected us. We were going to take the people out. We were going to take some Afghans out. We were going to take our equipment out. We left $85 billion worth of equipment. It's unthinkable. And they had a parade last week showing off all the equipment they took. It was like a surrender. There's never been a lower point in the history of our country. And don't think that China and Russia and North Korea and Iran weren't watching, because that was the greatest embarrassment in the history of our country, in my opinion.
If you're just joining us,
everybody's opinion.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking to Donald Trump, former President of the United States, about news of the day. We're going to talk about his new book that comes out in a couple of days in a moment. Mr. President, we all know that there's a supply chain bottleneck. And Joe Biden yesterday essentially said, it doesn't matter if you're naughty or nice this year, there are going to be problems. But he did say one person, and only one person, can promise whether or not you're going to get your stuff. Listen to this.
If you watch the news recently, you might think the shelves in all our stores are empty across the country. That parents won't be able to get presents for their children on this holiday season. But here's the deal. For the vast majority of the country, that's not what's happening. I've also spoken with the CEOs of UPS and FedEx, which are on track to deliver more packages than ever. Now, I can't promise that every person will get every gift they want on time. Only Santa Claus can keep that promise.
Okay, so he makes a joke out of it at the end, but it's a real crisis. If you were President of the United States, and clearly the administration did not plan adequately as the demand returned after COVID and the pandemic, and we're creeping back toward normalcy, normal times. Mr. President, what would you do to fix the supply chain crisis?
Well, first of all, it would have never happened. Nobody ever mentioned those words, supply chains. They were never brought up. We had perfect supply chain. We had an economy that was going like, we had the greatest economy in history. We then had the China virus. We fixed it. We did a great job with it. And between not only that, the ventilators, all of the different things that we did, stocking up, all of the states, which, by the way, all of the cupboards were bare, and that includes the United States government. There was nothing there. We did a hell of a job. We've got no credit for it, but maybe someday we will. But we would have never had a supply chain problem, but one of the causes is the mandates, because a lot of people aren't working because of forced mandates. That's one of the very big causes. Another thing that's going to be a big problem, and it's a problem like nobody's seen before. We were energy independent. We didn't need ships all over the place clogging up the waters coming in from Saudi Arabia, Russia, and other places. We were the biggest in the world. We went to the biggest in the world. Within 1 year, we would have been bigger than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined with real energy. And it's called liquid gold under our feet. We have an advantage that other countries like China don't have. So many different things, but the mandates had a lot to do with the supply chain problem.
Something that's also frustrating for Americans is the amount of crime that has gone up in our country and the way that our men and women in blue are being treated. The Fraternal Order of Police, they have had enough. They tweeted this out yesterday. They said enough is enough. More officers have been shot and killed this year than any other year. And there is one more month left. 314 officers shot, 58 officers killed by gunfire, ambush attacks on officers up 126% from 2020. Pray for America's law enforcement. Mr. President, this doesn't include the Utah officer that was killed that we're all praying for, and another officer that was shot and is trying to recover right now. What is your reaction to that tweet?
Well, when you look at San Francisco and you look at 100 kids or people running into a store together, and the cops are standing out there not allowed to do their job. They're not allowed to do their job, and you allow a thing like that to happen. We have a country that has no law enforcement, has no law and order. Our police are great. They're not allowed to do their job, and they're now being hit. People aren't even afraid. They go and shoot police. They don't respect them. The people of our country love our police, and they do respect them, but they're not allowed to do their job. If you allowed them to do their job, that would stop and crime would stop. But they're not allowed. You look at what's going on in New York. You look at what's going on in Chicago. And look at what's happening in San Francisco. And it's happening in many other cities that they don't want to report about. The media, outside of you people and a few others, the media isn't reporting this problem. But where you have hordes of people running in, kids mostly, running in and stealing, robbing stores where drug chains are closing all their stores in different cities because they can't keep them open. We just don't have law enforcement. We're not allowed to have law enforcement. Our country, I'll tell you what, our country is being destroyed. It should never be allowed to happen. The police have to be given their power back. They have to stop the crime. They can do it, and they want to do it, but they're not allowed to do it.
Mr. President, you referenced this a little bit earlier, and that's China. We know that they launched this virus unintentionally, perhaps. Who knows? They won't tell us. It's killed 750,000 Americans and millions around the globe. We know they just disappeared their leading tennis player because she accused a former official of sexual assault. The WTA is pulling out all the tournaments there. There's a growing push to boycott the China Olympics, who, by the way, also have rounded up their Muslims into concentration camps and are torturing them as well as harvesting their organs, while doing the overflights at Taiwan, threatening their neighbors. Is this the time to say we're not going to go to the Olympics, the Winter Olympics?
And by the way, before I answer that, none of this happened with us. They didn't send bombers over the middle of Taiwan. He knew not to do that. Had a very good relationship with President Xi. He knew very well you can't send bombers over Taiwan. None of that stuff happened. And they'll wait till after the Olympics and they'll do something with Taiwan now. They no longer respect us. They watched Afghanistan. They watched our generals not knowing what they were doing. They saw all of that, and they're watching very closely. They'll be doing Russia will be doing things, and maybe even North Korea will be doing things, because they're watching our country. We are psychologically weak. We built the military. I built a great military. We had jet fighters that were 40 and 50 years old. We have knew everything. We're in such great shape. But you still have to have the brain power to know how to use it. And they watch that withdrawal, and they and by the way, the withdrawal, get out. 21 years, but you get out with dignity and strength. And we were going to get out with dignity and strength. What they did, if these countries see that, and I'll tell you what, we're in a much different position. With that being said, you hurt the athletes, you hurt a lot of people. I would not do it. Jimmy Carter tried it. It didn't work. I wouldn't do it. That's not the problem. By the way, one other thing. I took in billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes and tariffs from China. We never got 10 cents, but 40 years they never paid us anything. Hundreds of billions of dollars. And businesses were starting to come back to us. China respected our country. Russia respected our country. I stopped the pipeline going to Europe. Biden approved it. But of course, he stopped the Keystone pipeline in our country, and others he's trying to stop. Now, we have a group of people, I don't know if it's Biden, it might not be, but we have a group of people that are destroying our country, and perhaps knowingly destroying our country.
But he doesn't want us to rely on fossil fuels. Do you think he's doing this on purpose so that we buy electric cars?
So fossil fuels are our strength. It's our advantage. And it also can fire up those big factories and those big plants. You look at what they're doing to our landscape. They're destroying our landscape, our birds. They're destroying with wind. And by the way, those turbines are all made in Germany and they're made in China.
Yeah, I know.
Okay? And if you talk about emissions, the making of those turbines, if you really go with the emissions theory, the making is so onerous to the environment that nothing they can do will ever save anything. You know, and as far as cars, in order to make the batteries of those cars, it's the electric cars. And now you're not going to have a choice because they want to go all electric. But doing that is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. They don't want to go that way. They're taking our greatest asset it's right under our feet. We are blessed as a country with tremendous energy reserves under our feet. And they don't want us to use them.
Mr. President, you were on social media, and you said a lot of people were saying you got COVID on social media. You said, well, that's the reason I got elected. Now that you're off social media, even despite January 6th, the investigation, everything that happened since, the impeachment that followed, your ratings, according to some friendly polling for you, are higher than they've been. Did you overrate the impact of social media? And in retrospect, will you need it if you want to run again?
I think that people are seeing the great job that we did. You know, again, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We rebuilt our military. We had great military support. You look at the Hispanic support we've had. We had the best Hispanic support. I just think that people are missing us.
But what about social media, Mr. President? But what about social media? Did it hurt you more than help you? And now that you're off it, and you see that nothing's really changed with your numbers except actually going up, do you think that you overemphasize social media?
It is strange because my numbers now are the best they've ever been. I think that's because maybe they look at the opponent and they look at what's happening to our country. I think social media is important. I think we have some very bad people. I think a lot of illegal things were done with social media. You understand where they can do $417 million. You know, if you spend more than $5,600, they put you in jail. And yet here's the guy spent $417 million and nothing happens to him.
Oh, on the
so I think social media is fine if it's used properly. And I think we're going to have a platform that's going to be incredible, and that's what's being developed right now.
Will you change your approach?
You know, I really, it's such an interesting question. I had to move fast. Our country was in bad shape. I had to move fast. Some of the niceties, you know, like let's sit down and let's talk very calm. I had to get things going fast. China was ripping us off. $500 billion a year. Europe, they sound nice, but they rip us. They're almost as bad as China. We made a new deal with Mexico. We made a new deal with Canada. We made a new deal with Japan. We were doing a lot of things, and you had to move fast. And sometimes in order to do that, you can't go. I can be as nice nice as anybody. I think I'm a nice person, but we had to move quickly, and sometimes
That's like a bird.
you have to break the eggs a little bit.
To make an omelet. Okay, so, Mr. President, during your 4 years as President of the United States, you had at least one or two official White House photographers with you at every event. Every time you were out in public, they were snapping pictures. There are millions of images in the vault, and obviously part of the Donald Trump presidential archives. You've sifted through all of those, and you put together the first book of your post-presidency. It's called Our Journey Together. And this book, it's a coffee table book. It's got 300 pictures in it. I understand you wrote all of the captions. How did you figure out what pictures were going to, out of the millions, how did you figure out which pictures went in and which ones did not?
Well, it's a great question, frankly, and it's somebody from who also.
Was President of the United States. I hate to say this, but Clay Aiken, just kidding. Clay Aiken is running for Congress, though, and we need to talk about this. It's kind of incredible. This ad for Congress is amazing. I want you to pay particular attention to how he tries to smear Madison Cawthorn, because Madison Cawthorn actually says nothing wrong in the clip that he presents of him. But here we are. Let's watch Clay Aiken for Congress.
Hey, folks. It's been a while. Now, I know I look a little different these days, but we've met before. I'm Clay Aiken. Most of you probably remember me like this. Skinny. Back in those days, I was a bright-eyed kid from North Carolina on my way to becoming a special ed teacher, and then that little singing competition changed everything for me. For decades, North Carolina was actually the progressive beacon in the South. We had the best roads and the best schools, because back then, the loudest voices in our government were progressives who actually made sure our state was always moving forward. But then things changed, and the progressives lost power, and we started getting backwards-ass policies like the voter suppression bills and the bigoted bathroom bill. Because today, it seems like the loudest voices in North Carolina politics are white nationalists like this guy. My friends, I encourage you, continue to make your voice heard, because do we love Donald Trump? Hateful homophobes like this one. What is the purpose of homosexuality? What does it create? And now we all know it's not just in North Carolina. For every Madison and Martin, North Carolina, Marjorie in Georgia, or Lauren in
Thumb.
Colorado. And these folks are
1, 2, 3, 4, and a thumb.
And I can tell you, I am sick of it.
Maybe.
And I'll tell you something else. As Democrats, we have got to get better about speaking up and using our voices. Because those folks ain't quieting down anytime soon. That's why I'm running for Congress. And just think how excited these guys are going to be when we elect the South's first gay congressman.
I just want to say, I watched his season of American Idol. He's suddenly gayer than he's ever been. Like, he's pretty, like, I was like, is Kelly Aiken gayer for some reason? Then I realized that at the end when he dropped the flags, that he's running on being gay. Like, you always know, like, this is the new thing. And I'm like, he just wasn't, not that I have any issues with him being gay, but, like, he just didn't present this, like, over the top when he was on American Idol. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be his brand. He's going to drop down the LGBT flags. This is how he intends to win. Michael, you know Clay personally. He is obviously saying that he's a really nice guy, and he's never done anything wrong, and he's kind, and he wants to listen to his potential constituents. And I just want to show a clip of him moderating your debate with someone who couldn't get a word in edgewise. He's the moderator here.
I'm asking the questions, so hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm asking the questions.
All right.
Feel free to try to control it, but you won't get it. I want to know what can be done. I'm not one of them. I'm asking you, what can be done about climate change? I'm pretty ignorant about the whole argument myself, I'll admit. I'm asking you, what should we do? Unless you want to cede the ground to Democrats to be the ones who come up with ideas, are people who are marching and shouting, Jews will not replace us, are they good people? Yes or no question. Yes or no? No, it's a yes or no question. Are people who are marching and shouting, Jews will not replace us.
Nazis are bad.
Can you say yes or no to this? Are you capable of that? I don't need to answer a question because I'm not on the stage.
Wait,
No, I did
Nazis
not
are
ask
bad.
you if Nazis were bad. And I
People
understand
who
those
don't
are
like
big
Jews,
words.
people who are Nazis are bad
Okay,
people.
there we
Clay.
That's not what I asked you.
I've answered this 5 times.
No, you haven't.
I
You're
think people will
rewording
find that I
it.
did.
You're rewording
This
it.
is
I feel so
same
bad for you. I feel so badly for you.
Why do you
It's
feel
very
badly for
easy
me?
to play victim. You can boo all you want to. I don't give
Everybody.
a f***ing I asked a yes or no question.
I know
Does
you're-
President Trump lie? Yes or no? Before you start, since clearly the audience thinks I'm biased, we're gonna let them ask some questions.
Clay, who ran for office as a
I just
Democrat.
want to. Well, I may be a hack, but I've got a fucking microphone.
Okay, Clay Aiken.
guy Clay Aiken.
Did you ever read the fine print that appears when you start browsing in incognito mode? It says that your activity might still be visible to your employer, your school, or your internet service provider. How can they even call it incognito? To really stop people from seeing the sites that you
She's a political commentator, co-founder of the Brexit Foundation, and author of the upcoming book, Documents, where we discuss the racial tensions currently simmering in the U.S. and how African Americans and other minority communities can claim a greater share of the American dream. Please welcome to the program, Candace Owens. Candace, thank you for being here. Now, we're hearing consistent cries of systemic racism, Candace, from politicians, from the media. On Tuesday, Attorney General William Barr testified before Congress, and this is what Representative Richmond, from right here in Louisiana, had to say. What?
You started your testimony with eloquent words about the life and legacy of John Lewis fighting systematic racism, voter intimidation, civil rights. The one thing that you have in common with your two predecessors, both Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Whitaker, is that when you all came in and brought your top staff, you brought no black people. That, sir, is systematic racism. That is exactly what John Lewis spent his life fighting. And so I would just suggest that actions speak louder than words, and you really should keep the name of the Honorable John Lewis out of the Department of Justice's mouth.
Candace, your reaction, and is there systemic or systematic, as the congressman said, racism in the United States?
I mean, it's so hard to listen to stuff like that because it's so obviously dishonest. I mean, what a bizarre thing to say that if you walk into a room and you don't walk in with a person of color, you're perpetuating some sort of systemic racism. Do the same rules apply if you walk into a room and you've got a white person, a black person, but you're blocking an Asian person? I mean, it makes no fundamental sense to say that depending on how many colored people are in the room determines whether or not the room is racist. And this is one of the things that people keep forgetting about America. We live in a majority white country, okay? So if you were in Uganda and you walked into a room and you saw majority black people, that would not be an example of systemic racism against white people. That would be an accurate reflection of the amount of white versus black people that live in the country. What black people are looking for right now, it seems, people like him who are race baiters, is to become a majority in every industry, in every room, on every sports team. And it doesn't work that way when you represent 13% of a population. This is such foolishness.
Candace, we keep hearing this systemic racism, though, that it exists, that it's in play. Do you believe it is? I mean, one could certainly say during the Jim Crow era,
want more. They want extra credit, right? They want to be privileged. They want to be ahead of people. And that is what's wrong. That is where the real racism is existing. To say to someone, you need to constantly be with a black person. I mean, how foolish is that, Raiden?
I need to play something for you. This is a recent interview with that great interviewer, Seth Meyers. This is MSNBC host Joy Reid, and she was asked about the Black Lives Matter movement. Listen.
You know, Black Lives Matter, it started, during enslavement, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter is an age-old movement that just changes names. It's been the civil rights movement. It's been run by SNCC. It's been run by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It's been John Lewis's movement. It's been Dr. King's movement.
Is the BLM a continuation of Dr. King's civil rights movement?
Yeah, I'm sure that Dr. King was a supporter of riot, of protesting, of burning down businesses, of killing and slaughtering Black Americans in the streets. I'm sure that's really what he was a proponent of when he was getting up on stage, surrounded by white people, saying that we need more peace. No, people in the civil rights era were actually fighting for something. They were actually fighting to put an end to racist practices. What they were really asking for was for the country to actually recognize the things that are promised and afforded to every human being under the Constitution of the United States. And we weren't getting that. We actually weren't recognizing the words of our own Constitution. And then we suddenly did. And what really happened during that period when blacks were finally granted true freedom in the forms of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is people went, oh my goodness, now I'm suddenly responsible for myself. Now I actually have to put in the work ethic. Now I can't complain or point to systemic injustice. And then we started seeing this whole era of white guilt, right? Of saying that, well, no matter what any black person does, they're guiltless and they're blameless. And we can point to 400 years of slavery to say that's the reason you got a bad grade on your test. What they're really creating is a system where Black Americans are never going to try and therefore never going to get ahead. And that is where the real racism exists. In telling somebody that they're less than repeatedly, so they don't even try. And that racism is being executed by and large by the left, by white liberals, and by the Democrat Party.
In the same interview, Joy Reid was asked why we're seeing white people increasingly supporting Black Lives Matter. Listen to what she said.
It's not just a black people concern. This is the public realizing if they're coming for black lives, they're eventually coming for yours. They're eventually coming for your security and peace.
Candace, who are they? What narrative's being created here? And who does it serve?
I'm assuming they must be the police officers, because since Black Lives Matter right now, their main thing, the big piece of the puzzle is defund the police. The police officers are going to come for your life, which is just, again, extraordinarily dishonest. It's incredible to me that these people are allowed to be on the air and allowed to keep spinning these lies. When police officers save lives, right? When the biggest threat to a black person on the streets is another black person, statistically speaking, and nobody wants to have that conversation because, again, this is a narrative. It's not a truth. This is a narrative that is being spun during an election cycle to create division. And so she knows she's being dishonest, and it's incredible to me that she can continue to do that with a straight face, knowing that she's bringing about harm upon the very community that she claims to be speaking on behalf of.
There's a story, Candace, it's gotten almost no media coverage. A black Milwaukee man, Burnell Trammell, who, by the way, was a supporter of Black Lives Matter, he was fatally shot last Thursday while sitting outside of his business. Now, he's often seen wielding large handwritten signs with his personal beliefs in big letters, okay? He supported George Floyd, police reform, and President Donald Trump. Now, it's suspected that his killing may have been politically motivated. Where's the outrage over the loss of this black life? I've heard nothing of it. We don't know his name at all.
Over all the black lives that are being lost at the hands of other black people and all of these shootings that are happening because now these cities are insecure because of these riots and these protests. It's not just him. David Dorn, the guy that we watched bleed out during the protests and riots when he was a police sergeant his whole life, 77 years old, retired, and gets shot and killed in cold blood because another black person was robbing his store. Where is the outrage for these 1-year-olds and these 2-year-olds that are being killed, with stray bullets on the south side of Chicago, in Baltimore, in Trenton, New Jersey? We've seen tons of these stories that have happened since and because, as a direct result of the fact that criminals are being emboldened by the fact that there are calls to defund the police because they know that there's a vacuum of security where they can And that really lets you know that what we're seeing happen is black people are being used as pawns to further a political progressive agenda.
What's the role of the black church in all of this, Candace? I've been reading a great deal about, and it's largely white theologians, white writers, bending over backwards to try to somehow accommodate Black Lives Matter, the movement, not the idea, but the movement, into their version of theology or the scriptures. Does the black church and the church at large have a role in restoring true justice in these communities, in our inner cities and in our urban communities?
This is a really difficult question for me to answer, and it's a discussion that I have with my husband all the time, as a Christian. You have to acknowledge that a lot of these progressive values and ideas that we got into, and that these horrible progressive values and ideas were brought to the black community via the church, right? Abortion, and we know that during the progressive era, Margaret Sanger hatched a plan to go to the black ministers because she understood, how close the black community was to their faith. We are the most faithful community in America in terms of church attendance, in terms of believing in God. Black America is the most faithful community. And unfortunately, the left and progressives saw that as an opportunity to pass through bad ideas. I live in Washington, D.C. When I walk past churches and I see LGBT flags and I see Black Lives Matter, fists raised, and on these churches, it scares me. It means that right now we're also facing an attack, not just on the family unit, right? Not just on racial harmony, but on the church. And that should be scary for everyone, because if you want to watch Western civilization crumble, you need to remember that Western civilization was built on Judeo-Christian beliefs. And so these routine attacks that we're seeing on people that are religious, right? Wanting people to shut down churches, saying that religion is dangerous, and now we're seeing progressive ideas pass through the church. This is a much larger plan to kill Western society. Western and the principles that govern Western society, that make the West the best, that make us different, and that have brought us to this place of greatness that we are in today. The role of the church should be to get back to the teaching of the Bible as it is, right. Not interpretation, not getting up with the times, not trying to be progressively woke, but teaching the actual content of the Bible. What we're seeing happen in the church should make every single person nervous.
Yeah, and reminding everyone that we're children of God. Forget the race, forget the background of people. We're children of God. If you start there, everything else will take care of itself. But we lose that. Somewhere along the way, that's forgotten, and we start playing these word games. Earlier this month, Candace, Kanye West, who I know you know, announced he was running for president. He had this to say about Planned Parenthood. He said Planned Parenthoods across the country have been placed inside cities by white supremacists to do the devil's work. Now look, there are questions about whether Kanye is a serious candidate for president or not, but what do you make of him calling out Planned Parenthood? And as you mentioned earlier, this is the organization that tried to distance itself from Margaret Sanger in the wake of those comments and her racist eugenist vision. Does what Kanye say resonate with members of the African American community?
It certainly needs to, and this really gets back to just Black Americans needing to learn their true history. How many Black Americans do you think actually know that Margaret Sanger was an avowed racist and eugenicist, who was a supporter of the Mississippi appendectomies and wanting women that were Black and impoverished to make sure that they could never have children? She was the person who created Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood still by and large executes successfully on her dream. We know that. 18 million plus Black babies aborted since 1973 should have everybody alarmed and discussing this. We know that the Black population growth has stagnated. And this is something at the same time, the irony that they're going around and looking at the history of every company and every brand, and Uncle Ben has got to go, and Aunt Jemima has to go, and Orlando Lake City has got to go, but the Planned Parenthood building still gets to stand. If you're looking into histories that are bad and you're pulling down statues, you're not going to pull down Planned Parenthood clinics. Margaret Sanger, her legacy gets to stand all over Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. These are questions that anybody should be asking. These are good questions to ask, and it should show you that they are here to further a narrative. And it is a narrative that, by and large, always hurts Black Americans. There's something about progressive policies that always lead to aggressive results in the Black community.
Yeah. doubt. No, there's no doubt. And this is, in some ways, this is arresting everybody's attention, one would hope, to the true tragedy and the true racism going on in these black communities. And it's via the groups you just talked about. We are seeing statues coming down, monuments and streets renamed. This week, Loyola University of Maryland announced that a residence hall named in honor of Catholic writer Flannery O'Connor, the great Southern writer, would be renamed due to recent concerns about her use of racist language in private correspondence when she was a teenager in the 1940s. Now, what's most striking about this is the president of the university, a Father Linan, said this about O'Connor's writings. He said, "I'm not a scholar of Flannery O'Connor, but I've studied her fiction and nonfiction writings, particularly in her fiction. The dignity of African American persons and their worth is consistently upheld, with the bigots being the object of ridicule." Does it make sense to cancel one of our greatest Southern authors? I mean, I guess Tennessee Williams, Capote, Twain are next here.
Well, they are. That's already happening. It's not next. It's already happening. On college campuses, John Locke. All of these people, all of these authors that I grew up reading in school are being canceled. They're not learning that stuff. They're being instead replaced with postmodern artists, postmodern writers and postmodern artists. And these are what the kids are studying. So you want to know why you have so many people that are supporting this? They're learning this actively in school. Of course you shouldn't be canceled. Of course, every single person, especially when you go back to a time where slavery was all over the world, you're going to find people whose characters are conflicted, whose actions were conflicted. But does that take away from their work? Should we not study their work? Should we pretend history never happened? I mean, because that's what they're after. They want to pretend history never happened, that nothing good ever came during a time where there was that. There's always going to be bad in the world. You can't pretend that every single thing that existed during bad periods somehow becomes moot and irrelevant and should be canceled. This is a dangerous way to be. And what we're talking about here really, at its core, are the tenets of Marxism and communism, right? That everything is fundamentally wrong about society. Everything is backwards. The family, the church, the writers, history, everything needs to go. And because they're moving towards some false utopian society that's never going to exist. So the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to wake up one day and you're not going to recognize the country that we live in. They're going to seize all of our rights. And I don't want to live in that society, which is why I encourage people to wake up now, because this fight and this threat that we're facing, this Marxist battle that we're in the midst of right now, is very, very real and has severe long-term implications.
Candace, you talked a moment ago about kids learning this critical theory in school. I mean, they're being spoon-fed. Oprah Winfrey signed a deal with Lionsgate and that New York Times journalist responsible for the 1619 Project. And this will examine the legacy of slavery via the lens of 1619 in television and film. And this all began with an issue of the New York Times Magazine in 2019 to mark the 400th anniversary of slavery on the continent. Two questions. What do you make of the 1619 Project? And are we going to see a new African-American history here? Is that what this is?
It is. That's exactly what it is. They want to pretend that none of the real stuff that actually happened happened. You're seeing this even. Forget the 1619 Project. Beyonce signed a deal with Disney, which is coming out with a visual album called Black is King, right? And she's got white serving her, and it's all about the black story. I mean, what is that? What are we actually doing here? You're trying to, in a weird way, erase white America, pretend that the colonists never happened, that none of this stuff ever happened. And it's so fundamentally dishonest, because this stuff that they're so angry about, it happens everywhere in the world, right? You want to talk about slavery? Slavery happens everywhere in the world. And it wasn't an institution that was put together by white men. It was an institution that was put together by black men, by Muslim men, by black and brown people, slave doing fishing and things for people that are being rescued. This is a really a sign of our remarkable privilege and our insulation in America. These people don't know what happens outside. They don't understand how tremendously fortunate they are to be in the United States of America at this time. If you are a Black American and you are breathing in America today, you are a part of the most privileged, elite Black people and white people that have ever walked the face of the planet today. And that's the truth they don't want to grapple with.
Candace Owens, thank you for your insight. I hope you'll come back. Candace Owens' new book, Blackout, hits stores September 15th.
We're on Facebook Live. You're not Candace.
Hi.
We'd also like to introduce you to Candace Owens. She's from Turning Point USA. So what do you do at Turning Point?
So I'm the director of urban engagement, so it's really just sort of focusing on the Black community, helping them understand that there are so many things that need to fix within the community, and it starts with understanding how we got lost.
What is Turning Point?
Turning Point USA is essentially a charity, and what we do is we mobilize conservative voices on campus because they've been completely drowned out by all of these, liberal teachers, liberal professors, and largely these liberal students and liberal presidencies that are controlling the budgets.
Conservative voices on campus.
Yes.
You've got to be discouraged, though, because on most campuses, there's 7.
We went from 0 to 1,900 Turning Point USA chapters, so we are incredibly encouraged right now.
Okay.
There's a movement happening.
You grew up as a Democrat
I did.
and conservative. How did that happen?
I sort of woke up one day, and it's a longer story, but what it comes down to is when you watch the campaign of Donald Trump, you could not wake up. You could not wake up to the idea that we were functioning under this propaganda. It was so vicious. The attacks were just sexist, racist, rapist at one point, and it just came every single day. And I said to myself, how did I buy into this media machine? What do I think? And so it was really this return to individualism, which I think is what his presidency represents.
Is your whole family wondering, where did we go wrong? Why? She was raised a Democrat, and now she's a Republican.
Yeah, I think my mom at one point said, sometimes the apple does fall really far from the tree.
How do you deal with social gatherings with your family?
Oh, I love to go right into the fire. People always say, do not talk about it. I think Thanksgiving, as soon as I saw the mashed potatoes, I was like, I can't believe Hillary thought she was going to, let's just right into the fire.
Stir that fire.
I love it. I love family feuding. It's the best thing in the entire world. So it makes us family. We fight no matter what. It might as well be about politics.
That's right. But if you say it with a smile, you kind of get away with it. You seem very pleasing.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some politics and dive right into this. Hollywood hypocrisy is the top of the list. We've been talking about it all morning because these celebrities, they're all about gun control and take the guns away, yet they're surrounded by they have their security guards with them when they get out of their chauffeur limos. They live behind the gates in Hollywood, and they have assistants. They live a different life, and all the people who are protecting them so the fans can't storm the stage, or protecting them so the fans can't get into the auditorium. They're all armed guards.
Correct. I mean, look, you nailed it. It's hypocrisy at its finest. And what it comes down to is what Donald Trump spoke about on the campaign is that there are these pockets in society, New York and LA, and they really don't get that there's a lot of country in between that, and that we, like you said, we don't have personal assistants that go and pick up our dry cleaning. There's real life happening for other people. And again, we value their talents, but they just don't get it. They're really far from reality at this moment in time. And I'm hoping that we can sort of help them come back down to earth.
I love the quote that we had from Dolly Parton earlier on, where she said, I don't comment on politics because I'm an entertainer, and it's not my position. And I was just like, Dolly Parton,
We had Michelle Malkin on our program this morning. She actually just won some big